Everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session of Knowledge and Know-How with NetApp Support. This is episode 7 in our webinar series, and we're really glad that you've joined us today. We've got some great content to share with you. First of all, I wanted to go over just a brief overview of the webinar. Number one, why are we doing these? The reason for the webinar is to discuss things that are happening in our NetApp Support Center. We want to proactively share product and support knowledge with our customers and partners regarding, new products, how to use our products, and how to make the best of your support experience. We're going to talk about things that we commonly see in the support center, issues, share the resolution of those, and also some ideas about how to keep these common issues from showing up in your environment. Also, if they do, how to resolve those as quickly as possible. Our focus as a company, as a NetApp, is building an effective partnership with our customers. So for the most part in the support center, we only talk to our customers when you have a problem. And we want to change that so that we're proactively working with our customers and sharing important information outside of working a case. One of our top priorities is that our customers have the best support experience possible. So our goal is that when you contact NetApp Support, you feel like you're actually reaching out to an extension of your own company. And we also want your issue resolved as quickly as possible. We understand, the impacts of downtime, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We want your system up running as smooth and effective as they can be. Some of the things we'll talk about during these webinars are we'll share tips and tricks regarding setup and maintenance. Again, we'll talk about products and how to use those products. And it's also important for our customers to have the knowledge of how to fine-tune your environments. We'll also look to share tools that are available for you to use and manage your environment and how to effectively use those. So now that we've done this overview, my name is Dwight Cranford. I'm a support leader in the NetApp Support Center. Today we have Nick Malwizel. He is one of our cloud experts in the support center. He's going to be doing the presentation today. Remirror is an escalation engineer, also an expert in our cloud products. He's going to be monitoring the Q&As and answering your questions. So you do have a Q&A window on your console there. Feel free to put any questions in. We are going to answer all the questions. We're also going to read those aloud. We do record these webinars. We have a YouTube playlist with all the previous episodes, and this one will also be added. So we do read them out loud, so that if you're watching the presentation on YouTube, you'll be able to hear all the great questions and the answers to those questions. So feel free to pop any questions that you may have in the question bar there. Today, Nick's going to be talking about deleting spare disks in CVO, and also replacing a failed AWS EBS volume. And then I will close it out with some information regarding the webinars and some upcoming events. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Nick.
Thank you, Dwight. Hi, everyone. As Dwight mentioned, I am a technical support engineer in the cloud team. I've been here for about 2 years now. And I'm really happy to be here with you today to be able to discuss about some common issues that you might be facing in CVO, and also how to identify them and how to resolve them. So today I would like to talk about how to delete spare disks in your CVO environment, and how to actually replace an EBS volume that shows as failed in your environment. So to begin with, how to delete spare disks. The first thing to keep in mind is CVO runs on RAID 0. This means spare disks are not supported. They will not add any benefits to your CVO. All they will do really is increase your spending with AWS. So you know how you pay per storage that you're actually adding, and not storage that you're actually using. So having spare disks really have zero benefits in CVO. Before I dive in on how to identify and delete those spare disks, I want to talk about Cloud Manager. So Cloud Manager, for those of you that are not quite familiar with it, is the tool that we use to manage and deploy cloud volumes on tap. It's very neat tool. You can see everything in one page, being able to see all your replication, all your relationship between all your working environment, should it be on-prem or in the cloud. And it's a very neat tool, very powerful, that been using every day, and very awesome tool all in all. One thing that I really want to put an emphasis on is Cloud Manager must be used for every storage administration that you will be doing with your CVO. And this includes creating aggregate, deleting aggregate, adding disks. For a good reason is, if you're not using Cloud Manager to do so, you might end up with a system of working environment that might become unstable and end up increasing your cost by, for example, having spare disks. So what to do if you've used CLI or System Manager to manage your storage? Well, more than likely, you will end up having spare disks in your environment. And as mentioned previously, we do not want spare disks in CVO. So first thing you would have to do is identify those spare disks. So to do so, you will want to log in first in your CVO CLI and run a storage aggregate show spare disks. So this command, really easy command, will display all the disks that have been labeled as spare in your environment. So in this case, we can see that I have 4 entries displayed. So this means that I have 4 spare disks in my environment. I do not want to keep those disks. So how do I delete those? Well, once I have identified all my spare disks, I will want to create an aggregate. So simple command, aggregate create, aggregate, give it a unique name. In our case, I just call it aggregate TMP. And discount, you will use the number of spare disks that you've seen previously. So you will assign all those disks to a new aggregate. One thing to keep in mind in AWS is you have a storage limit of 6 disks per aggregate. So in the case you have more than 6 disks, you might want to balance those disks between multiple aggregate. So let's say you have 7 disks, you can do an aggregate with 5 disks and another one with 2 disks. Once you've created your aggregate with your disk, you should be done in the CVO CLI. One thing I like to do for good measure is run an additional storage aggregate show spare disks, just to confirm that all my disks, my spare disks, have been assigned to an aggregate. Once you've created your aggregate, we will switch to Cloud Manager. Cloud Manager, you will locate the working environment that you've been working on, and you will enter that working environment. So you have 2 ways to enter your working environment, either by clicking the Enter Working Environment button. It's pretty self-explanatory, or you can just double-click on it, and it will open the working environment page. Once you're on this page, you will locate the menu button and navigate to Advanced and Advanced Allocation. So what is Advanced Allocation? It's this page that will list and reference all your aggregate. So whenever you want to create aggregate, delete an aggregate, add more disk to an aggregate, create a volume, you will want to navigate to this Advanced Allocation. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Every storage administration should be done through Cloud Manager. In my case, I could see here that my AGGR TMP aggregate is here. So I see that there's 4 disks attached to it, which matches the number of spare disks I have attached to it. And simply hover over the aggregate and delete it. So knowing that it has to communicate with your cloud provider and your CVO instances, it might take sometimes a couple minutes for the aggregate to be fully deleted. There's a way to see what is the current status of this. It's still in Cloud Manager. You can use the timeline. So where is the timeline? You will see it under All Services and Timeline. And what it does is it's a very neat tool that will list all the actions you've been taking on any of your working environment on Cloud Manager. It will list all the successfully completed actions, all the failed actions as well. So very neat for troubleshooting when something is not working as designed in your either CVO or Cloud Manager. And here we can see that indeed my aggregate was successfully deleted. So I have added here a couple links to the KB. There's a couple of KBs regarding how to delete the spare disk for CVO. Again, it's a very simple process, and want to eliminate all the spare disks. In my case, you could see that I had only about 400 gig of spare disks. I have seen sometimes some environment that have 15 plus terabyte of spare disks, and at the end of the year, it adds up real quick. It really increases the cost in AWS and really not adding any benefits at all for your CVO. So again, very simple process. Takes just a couple minutes, verify your spare disk, and if you see any, create an aggregate and delete the aggregate. So at this point, I would like to take a couple minutes and make sure that we're answering questions in the Q&A. Do we have any questions coming in?
Yeah, we sure do, and Ryan's answering those, so I'm gonna go through and read the ones we have so far. The first one is, if a customer's experienced performance issues with CVO, is this something that we can engage support on? Absolutely. If you're experiencing performance issues with CVO, you can open a support case and ensure that you add cloud volumes on tap and performance in the sections that that you get to choose from. So again, that's cloud volumes on tap and performance are the two keywords that you want to open your support case under. The next is, what if after deleting an aggregate from Cloud Manager, the constituting disk end up becoming spare disks again? The answer for that is, if for some reason the disks still show as spares when deleting the aggregate from Cloud Manager, this can rarely happen due to timeouts between the connector and the CVO instance, then you'll need to ensure ownership of the disks has been removed, then identify and detach and delete the EBS volumes from the AWS portal. And we have one other. Can I delete the spare disk directly from AWS EC2 console? The answer is, spare disk can be detached and deleted from the AWS portal if necessary once the ownership of the disk has been removed from ONTAP and the proper EBS volume has been 100% confirmed. And again, if you have questions, please make sure you put them in the section there on your console, on your screen, and we'll make sure that we get to those. So Nick, I think that's it for now. And you can continue.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwight. Okay, so today's next topic is how to repair a failed EBS volume in AWS. This is something that we can see because indeed disk fails even in the cloud. It could be to many different reasons. At the end of the day, the cloud is really someone else's computer. It could be a hardware failure, network failure, so many different reasons that a disk would fail. And we do not want to keep a failed disk, so how to replace that disk. So once this happens, let's say you have a failed disk, what will surely happen is the disk will be reported as failed in ONTAP. The Plex that's containing the disk will be taken offline, and the aggregate will be showing as degraded. And more than likely, if you're in a HA pair, you might see the node containing the spare disk being taken over. So first thing you want to do once you see this is make sure that the disk is actually broken. When you think about it, EBS volumes are network attached storage, So if there's a little hole in the network, a little network bleed, ONTAP will automatically fill the disk. It might not actually be broken. So first thing to do is from your CVO CLI, you can set your privileges to advanced and try to unfill the disk first. Sometimes you will see the operation fail with the following error message. So the disk is in a failed state with the outage reason and it failed. In this case, what I would like to do is from the EC2 console, locate the EBS volume and detach it and reattach it. This should take care of this if the disk is actually indeed not broken. Another thing, so yeah, what do you do if an EBS volume is not recoverable? So most of the time, if not 99% of the time, you will see maybe one or two failed disks, failed EBS. If you start seeing more than two, first thing I would do is, well, contact us, but also check with AWS, make sure that there's no power outage, that they do not have any data center outage, because when you start getting above two failed disks, it is a little bit more than a coincidence. So there might be something happening also in AWS, so it's always good to also confirm with them that everything is going well with their backend. So now let's say that AWS confirmed that there's no outage, everything is running smoothly on their end. We try to unfail the disk and ONTAP, and the disk is still showing as broken. So what should we do? One thing I want to note prior to start is for this webinar today, I will be using a random disk, in this case an NET210. So that disk is not broken. AWS makes it really hard for their end user to break a disk on purpose. So I could not break the disk myself. So I'm just picked a random disk in my lab. But at the end of the day, the troubleshooting steps will be identical. So all the things that you will see today will apply to a broken disk. So the first thing you want to do is identify your broken disk. Excuse me. So from this CVO CLI, ONTAP CLI, run a disk show dash container type broken, and this will list your broken disk. Again, I was not able to perform this for that webinar, but this will list the disk that is actually broken. And what you will do once you have this information is really making note of a few items that will be very important down the road. So you will want to get your disk name. In our case, that would be the NET210, but also make note of the aggregate. So here we see the sample aggregate 02. Make note of the plex and make note of the pool. And again, really important for later down the road. Another thing to note is what node owns the disk. So here we see it is my node 1. So once you have, again, node, disk name, aggregate name, plex, and pool, once you have all that information down, then we can move on to the next step. So next step would be, once you have all this information, you can safely delete the plex. So still from CLI, plex delete, your aggregate and your plex will ask for confirmation, and just yes, and plex will be deleted. So once the plex has been deleted, we're moving on to the fun part. Fun part will be to map your failed CVO disk with the EBS volume in AWS. AWS uses their own naming convention, and so does NetApp. So sometimes it can be a little bit daunting when you do not know how to proceed to associate what volume is showing under what disk name and ONTAP. And there's actually a not so well-known command that is really, really handy, as the disk show dash virtual dash machine dash disk dash info. It is quite a mouthful, but it is a very powerful command. What it does is map your CVO disk to your AWS EBS volume. So here we can see that my disk NET210 is owned by node 1. I can see the disk path as well. But most importantly, I really want to focus on that VM disk file entry and XVDN and that serial number, that string that starts with VOL, is more like what you would see in AWS. So again, this command is really handy when you're trying to identify what volume is corresponding to what disk in CVO. So take note of the disk name and the VM disk file. Once you have those information, you can switch to EC2 and we'll try to retrieve that volume in the EC2 console. So in your EC2 console, you will switch to the EC2 dashboard. Yes, I'm using the new EC2 experience. Getting used to it. So from here, you'll find your running instances. You will find the node that owns the broken disk. And from the storage tab, you will locate your EBS volume. And here I can cross-reference. I do see it is the device name XVDN, and my volume ID ends in 32 FCF. So I can confirm that those are the same disks. And I can move on with the disk replace. So what do I do with that? One thing actually I would like to note is from this page, you will see if your disk is encrypted or not. That has its importance. So if your disk is encrypted, you will just take note of this. That will be important down the road. So once you have located your volume, open it up in AWS, and here you will make note of a few information, but these are mandatory steps if you want to replace that disk. You will make note of the size. In this case, we're at 100 gig. The volume type, here it's a GP2. What node, what instance it is attached to. So it was node 1 in my case, and the AZ, availability zone. And here it would be the US East 1A. This is very important because we're going to replace the broken volume with a volume that is identical. If the volumes do not have the same configuration, then you might face some issues. So really make sure that you have all those information written down and ready to use to create the new volume. So yeah, so this is the volume create page in volume create wizard in AWS. So here I can confirm, yes, it is a GP2. My size is 100 gig. This is right. My AZ is 1A. Encryption, if your volume was encrypted, you would click on this and add the master encryption key. So same thing, it will be listed in AWS. And you can go ahead and create the volume. Once that volume has been created, go ahead and attach it. So in the action tab, you can just attach the volume to, in our case, node 1. And next step would be to detach and destroy the failed volume. You will not be able to delete the volume without detaching it first. So you will, in the action tab, make sure you pick the right volume, not the one that you just created, and detach it. Sometimes, I've seen it sometimes take 4 or 5 minutes. For some reason, the detached volume can be hung in AWS. If this happens, you can use the force detach. In some very rare cases, I've seen the force detach volume being stuck in pending. In this case, the only solution is to contact AWS and ask them to force it on their end. But that's very rare. I've only seen that happen only a couple times in over 2 years now. So once the volume has been detached, you will see it will be marked as available. You can delete it, and then we wouldn't have to worry about that broken volume anymore. Once we're done with this, I switch back to the CLI, and you'll identify the new volume that you created. So you run a disk show, you will see a new disk. So remember how my disk was a 210. In my case, it started showing up as a 212. Well, it is a new volume. It is introduced to ONTAP as a new volume. So more than likely, you will also see a new name. I've done this a couple times where I knew that my disk was 210, and for some reason I'm trying to assign 210 again, and I've been told no, 210 does not exist, and you're like, wait, and yeah, it always good to run a disk show, find your disk. When you run the disk show, you might see spare disks. This is normal. This is those will be the disks that used to be assigned to the Plex that we deleted. So they'll probably show a spare, and you will see that unassigned disk. This is the one that we want to assign to the aggregate. So what we'll do once you have identified a disk, classic disk assign. So disk assign, you pick the owner. Again, in my case, would be node 1, the pool, and like I mentioned earlier, you should have that written down somewhere. If you assign it to the wrong pool, then this will not be working well. So pool 0 and disk and the disk name. So that would be the disk name that we just got from that disk show that we ran previously. Once this is done, we'll have to remirror our aggregate. So aggregate mirror, aggregate, and the aggregate name. Very straightforward. It will show you all the disks that will be added to the aggregate. In our case, 3 disks, I'm good. I see that my NET 212 is showing, so I can move on and proceed with the mirror. So regarding the mirror, a resync, depending on how big your aggregate is, could be, in this case, 300 gig, and I'm barely using anything. So should be fairly fast, a couple seconds. Now, if you have a lot of data, if you have big aggregates that could be, I don't know, 16 terabytes, for example, it might take longer. There's unfortunately no way to tell you how long a resync will take. It really depends on the size of the aggregate and how much data is in it. So one thing that you might want to be able to do is monitor where the resync is, how long it is taken, and give you an approximation of how long it might take. And to do that, just run a Plex show. Here I have two screenshots that show while the volume is resyncing. So you will see all my other aggregates are normal and active, and the aggregate that I'm currently mirroring shows as resyncing. And I can see my resync percent, 0.18, so not so much. But at this point, yeah, we'll have to let ONTAP do its thing and let the mirror complete. And once it has completed, you will see run another Plex show, and you will see that normal, active, and the aggregate is back online in mirror. At this point, you will be able to give back the node that was in takeover. Now, if you have automatic give back enabled, you probably wouldn't have to worry about this, but it's always good to verify what was the status of your HA and if everything is up and healthy. So again, I provided a few KBs that could be handy if this happens. Again, this is not something that is hard to do. It's pretty straightforward. I know it can be at times a little bit intimidating, especially when it comes to part mapping your CV disk to your ABS volume. So if you have a failed disk and you have any questions and you're not feeling 100% doing it yourself, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We will gladly show you a few tips and tricks as well and how to easily replace your disk. At this point, just want to check if we had any questions in the chat.
Yeah, Ryan, did you want to go over the questions that we had so far?
Yeah. So, first question was the EBS disk is blocked. Is the connectivity to CVO via iSCSI or NAS? That would be the iSCSI because it's the block. And then we had, how long does it take for the resync to complete? So there's no way to really estimate how long a resync is going to take. It's going to depend on a lot with what's going on with the system. If there's ongoing snap mirrors, tiering, user data I/O, background process, and it also depends on why you're doing a resync. Generally, if a disk loses the communication to the back end and we need to recover with, say, a reboot of the CVO, and that communication is brought back, then you're just going to be doing what's called a level 1 resync, which is just the deltas between when the aggregate went offline and when it came back online. Now, if you actually had to go through the process that Nick showed here where you have to replace an EBS volume, then that's going to put you into a level 0 resync where it needs to resync the entire contents of the Plex over to the new rebuilding Plex. The level 0 resyncs can take significantly longer, and that kind of leads into the next question of, can I speed up the resync? There are a couple options that we have to be able to speed up the resyncs. Results from these options are going to vary. We've seen them have significant impact. We've seen them have not very much impact, but there is going to be a performance hit to changing these. So the expectations need to be set with the customers on their specific environment, user I/O, stuff like that before these changes are made. So that's a conversation that would need to be had with support during the working of the support ticket. And it looks like that's what we got for questions.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in. Just going to do a couple of closing things here, and probably end this one a little bit early. But again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll go over those. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here to wait until if you have more questions. But after the session, you're going to receive a survey. So please take a few minutes to fill that survey out. We want to hear your feedback. We want to continually improve our webinars. We do these live, so we can take live questions and answer what you all have. So we do want to put together the content that you want to see. So if there's something that you're interested in, you can put it in the survey. Also, we have an email address here. It's ng-supportwebinars@netapp.com. If you have a question about this particular webinar, if you go back and watch the other 6 in our playlist or future ones and have a question about those, you can email them to this email address. Also, if you just want to say, hey, I would really love to hear about this, shoot it to us and we'll make sure that we put it in one of our future webinars. I've mentioned a couple of times our playlist on YouTube, so there's a link to it here. I think it's also on your console in the list of links. So go out there, see if there's something that interests you and you want to watch. And again, any questions or comments, feel free to email us about those. So Ryan, did you have one more question that popped in?
Yeah, there was a question about pulling CVO disk performance information like IOPS, throughput, et cetera. AWS has some tools natively that they can use to get an idea of the performance of the disks. From the NetApp standpoint, we use what's called a perf archive. And if you go to our KB site, you can just search for performance archive or perf archive, and it'll show you how to get those collected. And then once they're collected, you can get those sent over to one of our engineers to look at, and they can give you more details.
Okay, and I think the follow-on to that is there any CLI?
There's not too much from the CLI because it's more of a larger look at the system. So the way it collects the data is from a whole bunch of different performance counters and stuff like that. So CLI would be more cumbersome to try to check performance from a CLI perspective. You'd be better off getting with a support engineer if you have performance issues and having them look at the system as a whole with a performance archive. Because sometimes if you look at specific outputs from a CLI, it may not show what the problem is. It may show a victim of what the problem is. So getting a wholer look at the system is better.
All right. Thank you very much. And I have one more slide to go over. So again, any other questions, go ahead and put them in. We'll try to get an answer before we end here. Hopefully everyone's aware that NetApp Insight 2021 is coming up in October. It is all digital this year, and it is free to attend. So again, there's a link in your console there in our list of hyperlinks. It will also be in the presentation that comes out. But go to https://insight.netapp.com. We are going to have some sessions from the support center, along with a lot of other sessions and content from our experts across NetApp. So again, it's https://insight.netapp.com to register. The event in the Americas will be October 20th. The event for EMEA is October 21st, and the event for our APAC region will be on October 22nd. Obviously, you can join any or all of those, but those are the 3 days for the event. And we do have one more question. Ryan, did you want to go over that one?
Yeah, it's just a question asking about ActiveIQ and if we suggest to use ActiveIQ to monitor CVO. We do. ActiveIQ is very helpful with keeping an eye on the general health and everything of not just normal ONTAP clusters, but the CVO clusters. Leading off of the performance answer, ActiveIQ is not going to give us as good information performance-wise as those perf archives would. So if you're looking at it from a cluster health perspective or events that occurred on the cluster, then ActiveIQ would be your way to go. But if you want to get into a more detailed performance conversation, then those perf archives would be the way to go.
All right. Thank you. All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end our webinar for today. Again, if you have questions that didn't get answered here, please email us, ng-supportwebinars@netapp.com. You can always open a case with us or call into the support center if you need our help. We're available 24/7. And we really appreciate everyone taking a few minutes out of your day to join us in this webinar. Hopefully you enjoyed the content and learned a few things, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. So thank you very much and have a great day.